The sharp, stinging sound of a slap rings out, then fades into dead silence. That sound, the crack of my daughter-in-law's palm against my cheek, was the moment my old life shattered. I stood there, a 68-year-old woman, humiliated before 130 guests at my own son's wedding. My glasses lay in pieces at my feet, but the real break was happening deep inside me. The physical sting was nothing compared to the searing betrayal in my son's eyes as he stood by and did nothing. He watched his mother be assaulted and remained silent, a statue in a tailored suit. This was the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally, now a stranger standing beside a woman who saw me as an obstacle to be removed. "That's what you get for being selfish, Eleanor." Chloe's voice cut through the stunned quiet, cold and precise. "An old woman doesn't need a 3-bedroom apartment. You're just clinging to space we actually need for our future. It's time you started acting your age and moved into assisted living where you belong." Her words were calculated, designed to paint me as a senile hoarder in front of everyone we knew. I knelt, my knees cracking in protest, my hands shaking so violently I could barely pick up the shattered fragments of my lenses. The carpet was thick and expensive, a stark contrast to the shattered pieces of my dignity scattered across it. Not a single person in that glittering crowd, dressed in their finest silks and suits, moved to help. They were spectators at my execution, and my son was the willing accomplice. His gaze remained fixed on the intricate pattern of the floor, as if studying it could transport him away from this scene, away from his complicity. "You should leave now," Chloe announced, brushing imaginary lint from her pristine, custom-designed wedding gown. The gesture was so casual, so dismissive. "Daniel and I need to start our life together without your constant neediness. Your apartment is the perfect starter home for us while we look for something more permanent. It's the least you can do after everything Daniel has done for you." The audacity took my breath away. What had he ever done? The monthly checks I'd secretly slipped him? The down payment on his car I'd provided? The years of emotional support I'd given, even when he pulled away? For months, I'd endured her subtle digs about my secondhand clothes, my decade-old car, my quiet existence. The comments were always delivered with a syrupy, fake concern. "I'm just worried about you, Eleanor," she'd say. But this public assault was different. It was a declaration of war, and it changed everything. Rising slowly, my body aching with more than just age, I felt the hot trails of tears streaking through my makeup. But beneath the shame and the hurt, something new was stirring. Something cold and hard and unyielding. This wasn't just a slap. It was the final betrayal after years of a calculated, slow-moving erosion of my spirit. It was the last card thrown down in a game I never knew I was playing. As I walked toward the heavy double doors of the ballroom, the weight of every judgmental stare felt like a physical push. Memories, sharp and painful, flooded my mind, each one a piece of the puzzle that led to this moment of absolute humiliation. 2 years earlier, Chloe had first stepped into my modest, though well-loved apartment. Her face had fallen in obvious, unconcealed disappointment. She ran a perfectly manicured finger over a bookshelf, inspecting it for dust. "This is where you live?" she'd whispered to Daniel, just loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "It's so quaint." The campaign began subtly after that. "Eleanor, wouldn't you be more comfortable in a senior community?" she'd asked during a family Sunday dinner 3 months ago, her voice dripping with false concern. "They have activities, prepared meals. At your age, maintaining this big place must be so exhausting. And honestly, a little dangerous. What if you fell? Besides, we're planning a family soon. We need this space more than you do. It's just practical." Daniel would sit beside her, nodding along, My own son transformed into her eager puppet, his own voice silenced by her overpowering will. The criticisms evolved strategically, becoming more brazen with each passing month. My wardrobe. Don't you own anything from this century, Eleanor? People will think we don't take care of you. My car. That thing belongs in a museum, not on the road. It's an embarrassment when you pick us up. My part-time job at the local library, a job I loved for the peace and the connection to stories. Why are you still working at your age? It makes it look like we can't provide for you. It reflects poorly on Daniel. Each comment was another turn of the screw, another brick in the wall they were building around me, tightening the narrative that I was a burden, an outdated relic in their ambitious, materialistic lives. They were a team, and I was the problem they needed to solve. What they never understood, what I had so carefully hidden for over 20 years, was that my simplicity was a deliberate choice, a shield. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for decades, my late husband Arthur and I had lived well beneath our means, a decision we made after he sold his first tech startup for an amount that would have made their heads spin. While others flaunted their wealth, we found freedom and power in privacy. The woman they pitied for driving an old Honda and shopping at thrift stores wasn't struggling. She was secretly a woman of immense quiet wealth, a shareholder in companies they could only dream of, an owner of properties they would never afford. The apartment Chloe so desperately coveted was the least valuable asset I owned, a sentimental place filled with memories of Arthur, not a financial necessity. The ballroom's artificially chilled air felt like ice against my burning, slapped cheek. I pushed through the heavy doors into the lobby, the noise of the party fading behind me. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I fumbled in my worn leather purse, the same one I'd carried for years, not from financial necessity, but from a deeply held principle that things should be valued for their utility and history, not their price tag. My fingers closed around my phone. With a trembling hand, I dialed the number I'd memorized long ago, a number I'd hoped I would never have to use for this purpose. "Michael," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, belying the storm raging inside me. "It's Eleanor. I need you to come to the Grandview Ballroom, right now. Bring the documents we discussed, the full portfolio. It's time." "Mrs. Vance." Michael's voice was instantly alert, his professional tone unable to mask his underlying concern. "Are you absolutely certain? This is an irrevocable step. There's no undoing this once it begins. The fallout will be significant." I turned and looked back through the small window in the door. I could see Chloe, standing triumphantly surrounded by her bridesmaids, laughing, undoubtedly regaling them with the tale of how she'd finally put her difficult, stubborn mother-in-law in her place. Daniel was pouring a drink at the bar, his shoulders slumped, but doing nothing to defend me, to correct the narrative. The sight of him, so defeated yet so complicit, solidified my resolve. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Michael," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, determined whisper. "They need to see. They need to understand exactly who they've been mistreating. 30 minutes. Don't be late." Ending the call, I shoved the phone back into my purse and walked through the lavish lobby and out into the cool night air. The transition from the opulent, fake world of the ballroom to the quiet, real darkness of the parking lot was jarring. I walked to my car with a resolve I hadn't felt in years, each step feeling heavier, more significant than the last. The mask of the harmless, vulnerable old woman was coming off, shattered along with my glasses on that ballroom floor. The real Eleanor Vance, the woman Arthur had known, the woman of strength and substance and silent power, was about to make her appearance. Settling into the driver's seat of my humble sedan, I watched the golden lights of the ballroom twinkle through the windshield. It looked like a scene from a fairy tale, but I knew the truth. In 30 minutes, their perfect gilded world would crumble into dust. In 30 minutes, they would learn the devastating, life-altering cost of mistaking a lioness for a lamb. The quiet was about to be broken, and the truth would be a thunderclap. This is where my reckoning begins. The public humiliation was just the trigger. If you want to witness the moment their world turns upside down, when secrets worth millions are revealed and the true price of betrayal is paid, make sure you're subscribed. The truth is coming, and it will change everything. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been underestimated because of your appearance or age. The cold leather of the car seat seeped through my dress as I waited, the silence of the parking lot a stark contrast to the roaring in my ears. 25 minutes. That's how long I had until Michael arrived with the documents that would detonate their world. Each second stretched into an eternity, filled with the ghost of Chloe's slap and Daniel's devastating silence. I stared at the ballroom doors, a fortress of false joy, and let the final painful memories solidify my resolve. It hadn't started with a slap. It started with a whisper, a slow, insidious poison. 2.5 years ago, Daniel brought her home for the first time. "Mom, this is Chloe," he had said, his face glowing with a hope that made my heart ache even then. She was beautiful, polished, her handshake firm and evaluating. Her eyes, however, didn't smile. They scanned my living room, calculating the age of the sofa, the modest art on the walls, the view from the window. "How charming," she'd said, and the word felt like an insult. The dinners that followed were master classes in condescension. "Eleanor, you managed to get this meat so tender," she'd remark, as if surprised I could operate an oven. "And these plates, so vintage. It's brave to hold on to the past like you do." Daniel would just beam, blind to the barbs nestled in her compliments. I was being professionally appraised, and I was failing the inspection. The campaign escalated after their engagement. The concerned conversations began. "You must get so lonely in this big place all by yourself," Chloe would purr, her hand resting on Daniel's arm, binding him to her narrative. "We found this wonderful senior community, the Oaks. It has a shuttle service, and they handle all the maintenance. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." I'd politely decline, and I'd see the flicker of irritation in her eyes before the sweet mask slid back into place. Then came the financial advice. It was during a tense lunch, just the three of us. Chloe leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Eleanor, we've been looking at your finances. That widow's pension and your little library job, it's just not sustainable. The value of this apartment could set you up comfortably for life in a nice, safe facility. Daniel and I could take care of the sale, handle all the stressful details for you." My son, my own flesh and blood, nodded along. "She's right, Mom. We're just worried about you." The betrayal in that moment was a cold knife, sharper than any insult Chloe could muster. The most chilling moment came a month before the wedding. I'd overheard them in my kitchen, thinking I was in the bathroom. "She's being impossible," Chloe hissed. "If she doesn't agree to move voluntarily, we'll have to consider other options." Daniel's voice was a low mumble. "What options?" "My dad knows a lawyer," Chloe replied, her voice cold and practical. "If her mental state is declining, if she's making irrational decisions about her assets, the court can appoint a guardian. We'd have control." I'd frozen, my blood turning to ice. They weren't just pressuring me, they were planning my legal overthrow. That night, I made the call to Michael. "I need you to investigate them," I'd said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. "I need to know everything. Debts, assets, everything." The report that landed in my inbox a week later was a horror story. Daniel's $50,000 salary was drowning under $90,000 of credit card debt. Chloe's stylist income was a fiction. She spent 5 times what she earned. Their lavish apartment was 3 months behind on rent. The wedding, this very spectacle I had just fled, was entirely financed by high-interest loans. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. My apartment wasn't a desire, it was a life raft, and they were ready to push me out of it to save themselves. Sitting in the car, the pieces clicked into a devastating whole. The urgency for the wedding, the relentless push for my home, Daniel's transformation from a loving son into a hollowed-out puppet. It was all driven by a financial abyss of their own making. And I, in my foolish love, had been secretly throwing them ropes for years. The work bonus that saved Daniel from eviction last year? That was me. The landlord discount on his rent? A monthly transfer from my account. I was the invisible foundation of the very life they were using to crush me. The irony was a bitter pill that threatened to choke me. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A text from Daniel. "Mom, where did you go? You're causing a scene. Chloe is upset. Please come back and apologize so we can enjoy our night." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He wasn't condemning the violence against his mother. He was asking me to apologize for my own humiliation. That text, more than the slap, sealed their fate. There was no coming back from that. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, gliding to a stop beside my car. Michael had arrived, punctual as ever. He stepped out, a sleek leather briefcase in his hand, his expression grim. This was it, the point of no return. He approached my window and I rolled it down. The night air felt charged. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low, "I have everything. The bank statements, the property deeds, the trust documents. I also took the liberty of preparing the suspension notices for all automatic transfers to Daniel's accounts, effective immediately. Once I walk in there with you, there is no going back. The financial and the emotional repercussions will be severe. Are you ready?" I looked past him, towards the ballroom. I could hear the faint thump of music, the echo of laughter. They were in there, celebrating their victory, believing they had won. They thought the quiet, old woman had been defeated. They had no idea she was just getting started. I opened my car door and stood, smoothing down my simple dress. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The tears were gone. The trembling had stopped. "I've been ready for this longer than I even knew, Michael," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Let's go introduce them to the real Eleanor Vance." As we walked towards the entrance side by side, I thought of Arthur. I hoped he would understand. We built this fortune to protect our family, to give them a future. I never imagined I'd have to use it as a weapon against them. But some battles choose you. And this was mine. The bouncer at the door gave us a curious look but stepped aside. We pushed the heavy doors open. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. It all hit me like a wave. For a moment, the crowd didn't notice us. Then, one by one, the conversations died. The music faltered. 130 faces turned towards Michael and me, standing in the doorway. I saw Chloe's smile vanish, replaced by a mask of confused irritation. I saw Daniel's eyes widen in panic. The silence was back, but this time it was mine to break. The confrontation is here. The truth is, moments away from exploding in front of everyone. If your heart is pounding, if you need to see their faces when the millions are revealed, you cannot miss the next section. Subscribe now to be the first to witness the fallout. What do you think will shock them the most? The money or the years of secret support? Let me know your predictions in the comments. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, heavier and more profound than the one that followed the slap. Every face was frozen, turned toward Michael and me standing in the doorway. I felt the weight of their stares, But for the first time all night, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like anticipation. I was no longer the victim cowering on the floor. I was the calm at the center of the coming storm. Chloe was the first to break. She took a sharp step forward, her wedding gown swishing with the movement. "Eleanor, what is this?" she demanded, her voice slicing through the quiet. Her eyes darted to Michael, taking in his expensive suit and professional briefcase with visible confusion. "Who is this? You can't just barge back in here and cause more drama." Daniel finally broke from his stupor, rushing to her side. "Mom, please," he hissed, his face a mask of panic and embarrassment. "Just leave. You've done enough." I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on Chloe. "You're right, Chloe. The drama should end. That's why we're here. To introduce some truth." I gestured to Michael. "This is Michael Sterling, my financial and legal advisor." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The name Sterling carried weight in certain circles. Michael gave a slight, formal nod, his expression impassive. "Your advisor?" Chloe let out a brittle, forced laugh. "What could you possibly need a financial advisor for? To help you budget your pension?" A few of her friends tittered nervously, but the sound died quickly. The atmosphere was too charged for mockery. Michael opened his briefcase with a definitive click. The sound echoed in the hushed room. He pulled out the first document. "Mrs. Vance has asked me to clarify her financial situation, as there seem to be some significant misconceptions." Daniel's face was pale. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing?" "I'm showing you the cost of that slap, Daniel," I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "I'm showing you both the true value of what you were so desperate to take." Michael began to read, his voice clear and devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage around us. "As of this morning, Eleanor Vance's liquid assets across various investment portfolios total approximately $6,400,000. The gasp from the crowd was collective, a rush of air that sucked the oxygen from the room. Chloe's jaw literally dropped. Daniel stared at me, his eyes wide with incomprehension. "What?" "No. That's impossible," he stammered. Michael continued, relentless. "In addition to her primary residence, Mrs. Vance holds the deed to the commercial property at downtown, which generates an average monthly rental income of $48,000, and a beachfront property in Carmel, currently valued at $3.2 million. Chloe took an unsteady step backward, her hand flying to her chest as if she'd been physically struck. The beach house?" she whispered, her mind clearly reeling, remembering the brochures for senior living she'd thrust into my hands. "But the lies don't end there," I interjected, my gaze shifting to my son. "The lies you told yourselves were the most dangerous. You thought I was a burden. You thought my life was small." I took a step forward, and the crowd seemed to lean in. "For the last 3 years, Daniel, the landlord discount on your apartment, that was a monthly payment of $2,000 from me. The work bonus that paid off your maxed-out credit card last Christmas, that was $5,000 from me. The down payment on the car you drive, that was me." Daniel's face crumpled. No, that was my bonus. My promotion." "There was no promotion, Daniel," I said, my heart breaking for the son I had lost, for the man who had chosen to believe a comfortable lie. There was only a mother trying to keep her son afloat, not realizing she was feeding the very monster that would turn on her. "I have paid over $150,000 to sustain a lifestyle you couldn't afford, for a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle." The truth landed with the force of a physical blow. Daniel sank into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. The image of his despair was devastating, but it was a necessary pain, like lancing a wound. Chloe, however, was not broken. She was enraged. "You lied! she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You lied to everyone. You dress like a pauper. You live like you're poor. This is a trick. This was a choice." My voice rose, finally filling with the emotion I had held back. A choice my husband and I made to have a real life, not one defined by wealth and the parasites it attracts. It seems we were wiser than we knew. Michael saw the opening and delivered the final tactical blow. He pulled another set of papers from his briefcase. Furthermore, as of 9:02 p.m. tonight, upon Mrs. Vance's instruction, all automatic financial transfers to accounts held by Daniel and Chloe Vance have been permanently terminated. The guarantee on the lease for your apartment has been revoked. The landlord has been notified. You have 30 days to vacate. He wasn't finished. He looked directly at the wedding planner who was watching, pale-faced. And the guaranteed payment for this event, which was secured by Mrs. Vance, has been withdrawn. The venue management will require immediate alternative payment to continue services. Chaos erupted. The band stopped playing entirely. Guests began talking all at once, some pulling out phones, others heading for the exits in a panic. The perfect wedding was unraveling in real time, a tapestry of greed being pulled apart thread by thread. Chloe was hyperventilating, her perfect composure utterly shattered. "You can't do this. This is our wedding. We have contracts." "You have nothing," I said, my voice dropping, back to a calm, firm tone. "You have debt you created. You have a marriage built on a foundation of manipulation, and you have the consequences of your own actions, finally arriving." I looked at my son, who was sobbing quietly into his hands. A part of me ached to go to him, to comfort him. But the time for that was long past. He had to sit in the ruin he had helped create. "My God, Eleanor," a voice whispered from the crowd. It was my neighbor, Joseph, his face a mixture of shock and dawning respect. All this time, I confirmed, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the guests. The quiet widow with the simple life. You all pitied me. Some of you even agreed I should be put away, but you never once saw me. I turned back to Chloe and Daniel. You wanted my apartment? You can't even afford the rent on your own. You wanted my life? You have no idea what it costs to build one with integrity. The ballroom manager was now at Michael's side, speaking to him in low, urgent tones. The party was over. The fantasy was dead. I had come here to be humiliated, but I was leaving empowered. The mask was off, shattered on the floor along with my glasses. They had seen the real Eleanor Vance, and the sight had destroyed them. The truth is out, and the fallout is just beginning. The financial safety net is gone. The wedding is ruined. But what happens next? How do Daniel and Chloe survive when the reality they built on lies collapses? The final chapter of this story of betrayal and empowerment is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss the stunning conclusion. What would you do if you were in Eleanor's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The chaos in the ballroom was a symphony to my newly liberated ears. The gasps, the frantic whispers, the clatter of chairs as guests scrambled. It was the sound of a fantasy dying. Chloe was no longer a blushing bride but a cornered animal, her eyes wide with a feral panic. Daniel remained crumpled in his chair, his sobs the only honest sound he'd made all evening. The facade had not just cracked, it had vaporized. Michael handled the ballroom manager with practiced ease. "The contract is clear," he stated, his voice cutting through the din. "The guarantor has withdrawn. You may seek payment from the individuals who signed the event order. Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Vance." He gestured toward my son and his wife, and the manager's face hardened as he turned to them, a vulture sensing a fresh carcass. I didn't wait for the final act of their financial implosion. My work here was done. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, my head held high. This time, no one looked at me with pity. They looked at me with awe, with fear, with a dawning, terrible respect. Joseph, my neighbor, met me at the door, his eyes shining. Eleanor, I had no idea. Few did, Joseph, I said, offering a small, weary smile, and that was the point. The cool night air outside was a baptism. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of decades of pretense lift from my shoulders. The woman who drove away from the Grandview ballroom that night was not the same one who had arrived. She was free. The first week was a whirlwind. News, as it does, traveled fast. My phone rang off the hook. Relatives, old acquaintances, and a startling number of reporters. I granted no interviews. My story wasn't for their headlines. It was my own. Daniel called 13 times. His messages evolved from anger. How could you do this to us? You've ruined my life. To desperation. Mom, they're evicting us. Chloe's parents are furious. We have nowhere to go. I listened to each one, my heart a stone in my chest. He never once said, "I'm sorry for what we did to you." His remorse was for the consequences, not the actions. Chloe, in a move that surprised no one, left him a month later. The stress of their newfound poverty, the shame, the collapse of her carefully constructed image, it was too much. She took what little cash was left and moved back in with her parents, filing for annulment on the grounds of fraud. The irony was exquisite. Daniel was truly alone, just as he had left me alone in that ballroom. He showed up at my apartment 6 weeks after the wedding. He looked haggard, aged a decade in a matter of months. He stood on my doorstep, a ghost of the man I'd raised. "Mom," he whispered, his voice ragged. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, the threshold a tangible representation of the boundary between my past and my present. "Daniel." "I lost everything," he said, his eyes pleading. "You lost what was never truly yours," I replied, my voice steady. "You built your life on my secret subsidies and your wife's greed. That was a house of cards. It was always going to fall." He broke then, truly broke. Sobs racked his body. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I was blind. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." I corrected him gently but firmly. "There's a difference. You saw what Chloe was doing, and you allowed it because it was easier than standing up to her. You saw me as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved." He had no rebuttal. He just stood there, weeping on my doorstep. And for the first time, I saw not a monster, but a broken, foolish boy who had made catastrophic choices. The anger in me softened, but it did not disappear. Forgiveness is one thing. Trust is another. "I am sorry for my part in this," I told him. "I protected you from consequences for too long. I thought I was helping, but I was enabling. I helped create the man who could stand by while his mother was slapped." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "What do I do now?" "You rebuild," I said. "On your own. You get a job, any job. You find a small apartment you can afford. You learn the value of a dollar you earned yourself. You become a man of character, not a puppet of circumstance." I paused, looking into his lost eyes. "And if, one day, you can look me in the eye and tell me you've become that man, then we can talk about a relationship. But it will be a new relationship built on honesty and respect, not on what you can get from me." I closed the door softly, leaving him to his reckoning. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. That was 2 years ago. My life now is nothing like the one I left behind in that ballroom. I sold the apartment, not because I had to, but because the memories were too heavy. I bought a beautiful, modern condominium with a stunning view, not to flaunt my wealth, but because I finally felt free to enjoy it. The Eleanor who hid in thrift store clothes is gone. I now wear what I like. a quiet, elegant reflection of the woman I am inside. The greatest change, however, is not in my home or my wardrobe. It is in my purpose. Using a significant portion of my wealth, I founded the Vance Guardian Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting seniors from financial exploitation, particularly by family members. We offer legal aid, financial counseling, and a safe haven for those who, like me, found themselves under siege from those they loved the most. The cases that cross my desk are heartbreakingly familiar. The pressured property sales, the forged signatures, the slow, insidious erosion of an elder's autonomy. But now, we fight back. Joseph, now a spry 74, is my head of community outreach. Lucy, my niece who stood by me, runs our educational programs. We have helped hundreds of people reclaim their power. My pain has become my purpose, and there is no greater healing than that. Daniel? He is on his journey. He works as a manager at a logistics company, a humble but honest job. He lives in a small studio apartment. He calls me once a month, not to ask for anything, but to tell me about his life. The conversations are still stilted, the trust still a fragile seedling. But he is trying. He is finally learning the value of things. I have set up a trust for his future, but he doesn't know it. He cannot know it. That knowledge would poison the authenticity of his struggle. He must build his own life for himself. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I think of Arthur. I hope he would be proud. We amassed our fortune to secure our family's future, and, in a way, I have. I have secured a future where dignity is not for sale, where love is not conditional, and where it is never, ever too late to stand up for yourself. The slap that was meant to shatter me instead shattered the cage I had been living in. I walked out of that ballroom broken, but I walked into a new life, whole. The greatest revenge is not wealth or schadenfreude. It is a life lived authentically, powerfully, and on your own terms. My name is Eleanor Vance. I was betrayed, I was humiliated, and I survived. More than that, I thrived. This concludes my story of betrayal and the hard-won strength that followed. But every ending is a new beginning. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or empowered, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories and support are what give this journey meaning. Subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of resilience and truth. The next story of courage is just a click away.